Welcome to the Ringer NBA show. I'm Chris Vernon. Joining me as he does every Tuesday from TheRinger.com is Kevin O'Connor, a.k.a. Kevin O'Bomber, a.k.a. Kevin O'Concert, a.k.a. Kevin O'Model. Kevin!
Verno, you got me hungry. I walked in here, heard you on House of Carbs with Joe House. Sounded good. I want some fried chicken now.
We've got to get you trying Gus's Fried Chicken, which has a location in Los Angeles, I am told. Before we get to anything, do you know what I'm going to bring up, Kevin? And it's not the NBA.
I have no idea.
It's that video with that girl from The Bachelor that you filmed.
Oh, what did you think of the video?
I've never even noticed that I get the green bubble with you. And she's dead right about that.
Yeah.
You with your phone and the fact that it comes up green, something that you have gotten away with me that I haven't even, it didn't even register with me. And yet there it was when she was saying that. I thought, now this is sage advice. For somebody that doesn't know, you filmed a video. What was her name from The Bachelor?
Becca Martinez.
And then in the course of, she was giving you tips on your Instagram. And one of the things she brought up during the course of it was what type of phone you had. And she said that this is a big problem. That in fact, if you got a girl's
Samsung
number,
Galaxy S6, to be clear.
But if you got a girl's number and you texted her, the fact that it would come up green would be an immediate red flag. And I thought, wow. Wow.
I don't know if that's the primary problem, but could be one of them.
I'm just saying, you got to do everything to help yourself out, Kev.
Especially being in LA now. It's the best advice I think I ever received. Thank you, Becca. Shout out to her.
Something I would have never thought of prior to, but that was not that, hey, listen, beauty may be on the inside, but you will be immediately disqualified from pretty girls with the green bubble. That's what I gathered from her.
I just need somebody that also has a Samsung, I suppose.
That's going to be a light field to pick from, Kev. Get with the times, my brother.
I don't know, man. I didn't know that on Tinder they could know if you have a Samsung or an iPhone. Haven't had much luck there either.
Oh, really? Who doesn't have luck at Tinder?
I'm going to avoid this.
No, you're not avoiding it now.
I will do another Ringer NBA After Dark episode.
Man, we need to. And in fact, well, listen, for those of you that wondered what happened to last week's episode, the whole damn thing was about Tinder, and so they wouldn't even run it.
We brought on everybody from the staff to chat. And
we brought on everybody from the staff, and it was all about Tinder. Last week is the lost tape. Just in case that anybody wondered what happened, we had some technical difficulties and were unable to post it last week. We do have this week's show, though, and there is some interesting stuff going on. Not the least of which, Kevin, is when we wake up this morning on Tuesday morning, I never in a million years would have fathomed that we would be talking about the Houston Rockets being in first and the Warriors being in second. Those make sense. The 3 seed in the Western Conference as of this morning is the Portland Trailblazers, who have now won 7 in a row and 9 of their last 10. And by the way, the 4 seed is New Orleans.
Unbelievable.
What is going on?
And yet, when you look at the standings, Portland still only has a 3-game lead on the Clippers, who are in the 9 spot, and a 4-game lead over the Jazz in the 10 spot. It's still that tight. But with Portland, Chris, we had something on the ringer.com today about which team in that 3 to 10 range has the best chance to take down the Rockets or the Warriors. And I chose the Thunder. Haley O'Shaughnessy chose the Blazers. And the Blazers would have been certainly one of my top 2 choices. And the reason why is, as we saw last night, Damian Lillard can just go off at any time to either bring your team back in a game or keep them in it or to extend the lead. And C.J. McCollum was capable of that too. He's been extraordinary for the Blazers over this stretch.
And we did not get we didn't get a good read on them last year, right? Because of the Nurkic injury. You know, they closed the season rather strong last year, but then he got injured. And so we didn't get to see them at least at full strength in the sense that what they looked like the last 20, 30 games. And then we came into this season and we were like, well, that was probably just a mirage, right? They're pretty good. They're over 500 team, more than likely a playoff team with some outstanding players in their backcourt. But when we thought last year, hey, they've been playing as good a basketball as anyone for the last 30 games of the season, possibly. And then we didn't get to see that version of them in the playoffs. We didn't know if over the course of a full season, if it would all shake out the same way. And then here they are again with 20, right? I guess they've played they played 64 games. So they got 18 games left. 18 games left in the season. And I mean, they're chugging right along again. 9 of their last 10, 7 wins in a row. And they look much like last year, like there's something to be dealt with.
Well, they certainly have. And it's not just Dame and it's not just CJ McCollum either. They're getting contributions from other guys. The rookie center, Zach Collins, has stepped up in recent weeks after getting off to a slow start to the season. Last night, he didn't do a lot. He had 4 fouls in 9 minutes. But over this win streak and over this kind of last couple of weeks, he's been really good. Shabazz Napier has turned into a competent backup point guard for them. Pat Connaughton continuing to chug along, being a good floor spacer off their bench. They have depth on that team, both in the starting lineup and on the bench. So I think they're the type of team. Look, Houston and Golden State are far and away the favorites. But if you are looking for a team that, hey, they get a shot, they could pull it out. Portland's one of those teams. They might not continue this win streak through the end of the season, but I do think that they are certainly going to be one of those teams that's going to make a little bit of noise in the playoffs.
We break ways on this. I don't find them over the course of a 7-game series. I mean, I still think San Antonio, Minnesota, Oklahoma City are teams that I would want to see less.
What about with, let's say Kawhi comes back in late March? I mean, how confident can we really feel that he's going to be Kawhi? Same with Jimmy Butler on the Wolves.
I mean, we can't feel confident about either of those, but I mean, I have to at least project.
But you'd still put them ahead of Portland, in terms of playoff power rankings or whatever.
Yes, given what they have been through over the course. Well, and the other thing is, with Minnesota, you're talking about a team that I think can play the different kinds of ways. I do wonder about Portland. See, with the best teams, with Houston and Golden State, you're going to have to make them uncomfortable. That's your only chance. If you try to play them in their range, you're dead. You can't be playing them in the 110s, the 115s, something like that. And I do feel like Portland will try to get in those, we're just going to try to match the score with you.
I don't know. Their defense is top 10 this year.
I understand.
That's good.
I understand, but I think when they get in those games, you need to be able to drag that game to where low hundreds is going to win it. That's what I think against Golden State and Houston. I don't think that you're going to be able to play high-paced games against those. And I get that their defense is good, but I also think that over the course of, over the course of a series, that when those teams figure it out and they get up, running up and down, like McCollum and Lillard want to score too. You know what I mean? Like they're fine with getting up and down. And there may be a couple of games in the course of a series where they're able to do it. I just think, you look at when, let's just say Houston, right? So Portland played Houston in early December and they lost 124 to 117, right?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's not, they played them in January and they lost 121 to 112, right? Like these are the type of things that cannot take place. That's my opinion, right? You can't be playing them in that range. What you've got to do is try to get those games lower, which is easier said than done for sure. Right. But I don't think that once those scores get up there, 124 to 117 and 121 to 112 and these kind of scores, I think that, I don't know. I'd rather have a Spurs team that is willing to play you, and slow that game down, or a Minnesota team that is willing to play you and slow that game down.
That's the tough part with those teams though. The Spurs best defender, Kawhi Leonard, is out. The Wolves best defender, Jimmy Butler, is out. And then Andre Robertson on the Thunder, their best defender, is out for the rest of the season. So, I mean, even with those 3 teams where perhaps on paper, when healthy, you put them ahead of Portland, they don't have their best guy on defense. So I agree to an extent with what you're saying. You need to have the defense kind of to drag the opponent down. But those teams are missing their guys right now. And we don't know. Jimmy Butler, they said out indefinitely. So we don't know when he'll be back. Robertson, we know, is out for the rest of the season. And Kawhi, to be frank, didn't look great earlier in the season when he was back.
Well, and I'll tell you this. I watched the Spurs last night. I just figured, all right, this is blown out proportion. Yeah, they're 3-7, but Aldridge has had the ankle thing and whatever else. Not like that has made some kind of, it's interesting that we're bringing up like injuries now regarding the Spurs as if that's ever had some significant impact on their success or failure over the course of the years. There was something off with them though when I watched them last night. There was something off, and I know that, they had moved to the DeJounte Murray in the starting lineup, and then that's kind of had, I think, it started off pretty well, and then maybe more lately it's had mixed results. Pop pulled him early in the game last night, and then even at the end of the game, it was still Tony Parker closing things out for them, and that was against a Grizzlies team that had lost 13 in a row, and they needed every bit of Tony Parker to get that thing done. Obviously, they had blown the lead over the weekend in short form to the Lakers. Prior to that, they had gotten beat by New Orleans on their home court. I mean, you were talking about, if they lose that game to the Grizzlies last night, they're losing 3 straight home games, which hasn't happened in forever. So I don't know, it might just be the malaise of the season, that it's, a veteran team and it's getting later in the season. And so, but I mean, we're going to get a good view of them Thursday night. They are playing at Golden State.
And then at Oklahoma City on Saturday, then at Houston on Monday. And then they get another game against all 3 of those teams over the course of the rest of the season. Two games against the Wizards. Their schedule's really hard coming up.
Listen, Kev, you're talking about with San Antonio. I mean, we said that Portland's right now 3, New Orleans is 4, but everything's kind of bunched up. They're 3-7 in their last 10 games, as we mentioned. And we just said they're playing at Golden State. They're playing at Oklahoma City. They're playing at Houston. If you hit a 3-game losing streak here, you're in danger of being on the outside looking in this playoff race, because right now the Spurs are the 5 seed. They're 2 games ahead of the Clippers. They're 3 games ahead of the Jazz.
And then after that Houston game, you get a game against Orlando, but then you get New Orleans, Minnesota, Golden State, Washington, Utah, Milwaukee, Washington, Oklahoma City, Houston, Los Angeles Clippers, Los Angeles Lakers, Portland Trail Blazers, Sacramento, New Orleans. There's a lot of tough games over that stretch for San Antonio. And I mean, this is something I'll be writing about on Thursday on The Ringer, where with San Antonio, they've gotten through this before, right? Like, people have said they've been done, right? People said that back in the early 2010s, that San Antonio's done. I mean, they could get out of this, but they're in an interesting spot, Chris. They could be in danger of missing the playoffs. And then with all the stuff with Kawhi, the age of a lot of the guys on their team, the upcoming free agencies of a bunch of others, they're really at a crossroads right now. And they don't have a lot of young assets on the team aside from DeJounte Murray, where the decisions that they make over this coming summer, really over the next 18 months or so, the next 2 off seasons, are going to decide the way they look for the next decade.
The Kawhi Leonard situation, and especially with the story that came out earlier this week about the negotiations with Brand Jordan, is just like everything about his whole season has been strange. You're talking about a guy that's been in the top, 3 or 4 in MVP voting the last couple of years. And then a few years back won a finals MVP and was considered by everybody to be one of the top 5 players in the league and possibly the best 2-way player. And then you have like all the stories have been like negative this year. You got the stuff coming out. You got, Popovich obviously goading him by coming out publicly. I don't know if you read that follow-up article to that or no, it wasn't a follow-up article. I heard Adrian Wojnarowski say this, and he said, he was giving insight to you. Remember when Popovich came out and said, I don't expect to have him back this year?
Yes.
He said that press conference was for an audience of 1. And I was like, oh boy. So it was what I thought it was, right? Yeah. Which is, we're attempting to send a message. We're going to let the free world know that you're choosing not to play basketball. It's not because you can't. And then you got all this Jordan stuff going on with the Brand Jordan. I mean, it feels like they just started promoting him with the Kawhi though. And like, it was just becoming something. And so who knows? There's something real that is going on with him and that franchise that is very hard to figure out. And maybe him personally.
It's like we discussed back in January, Chris, when the news first broke that there was a rift between the Spurs and Kawhi, and we chatted about how, I heard rumblings that it was because of the injury and how it was being handled. San Antonio felt one way, Kawhi felt one way about it, Kawhi and his circle felt another way, and that turned out to be true. The other part, that I heard from the same person at the time was there's something, it's unclear what with the shoe company or the inner circle, and him there was the talk about him wanting out, and it's like, well, why? And with the report this week that he wants a $20 million deal in the range of like the top end players, maybe the shoe company doesn't want to give that to him, and the reason why they want to give that is because he's a quiet guy in a small market, right, where his stardom doesn't transcend the market. Like Russell Westbrook transcends Oklahoma City. Kawhi Leonard doesn't in San Antonio. So whether Kawhi wants out or not, who knows? I mean, that's impossible to say. And even if he does within this moment, it doesn't mean he would a week from now. You can't ride that wave all the time. But the fact is there's something weird happening, whether it's with Kawhi or people around him, that maybe they feel like a player of his quality should have a bigger name nationally. I don't know. There's a lot of factors. It's a really weird situation. I'm not sure exactly what's happening, but everything seems to be pointing in the same direction. That's for sure.
Yeah. He is also not a big individual highlight guy, right?
No.
And we can act like this stuff doesn't matter, but just take a week ago, when that James Harden thing happens, everybody sees that. Everybody sees that, right? When he drops Wes Johnson and he's staring him down, it is unavoidable, right? And like, you think about guys throughout the league, there's a lot of really outstanding players, but like, they don't have these viral moments and they're not on House of Highlights all the time and whatever else. And so while people all respect Kawhi Leonard and think he's fantastic in terms of the big highlights or the things that now gain the most amount of popularity, he's not there. And the other thing is, yes, we know less about him than anybody else. And he shows less personality than anybody else. And that goes into buying somebody's product. It just does. Right. And while we might not have known everything personally about Michael Jordan, we certainly were able to gather what we thought about him with his flair during the games and then, the intensity of which he played with. Whereas Kawhi Leonard, like, if you ask people to do imitations of him, like, people don't even know what his voice, people don't even know what his voice sounds like. You know what I mean? Like, they don't even know what his voice sounds like. That's a hard sell, I think.
I had an agent say to me, and this is more of a general thing, not about Kawhi. It was just a general statement. Let me make that clear. He said he's represented a lot of clients in his time, and he said what people think of them is not necessarily what they are. And with Kawhi, like you said, we don't know a lot about him, and that doesn't mean that we can put this we can install this personality as a quiet guy that's always about the team, and he is, right? He has been. But that doesn't mean maybe on the inside he doesn't want to go out there and score 33 points a game because he feels like he's capable. Maybe he wants to be a guy that puts up 22 shots somewhere to see if he can reach another level. Maybe he wants that.
Right.
And I wouldn't knock him for it if that's what he wants. I hope it happens in San Antonio. I think it would be amazing.
It's reminiscent of a guy like Marvin Harrison, right, in the NFL. He put up amazing numbers. Everybody thinks of Marvin Harrison as one of the great receivers ever, right? Mm-hmm. And yet we know nothing. I mean, unfortunately, we know about the post-career. that maybe
we do know about that, yeah.
The quiet guy might very well may be the most dangerous. But that being said, the guy that has the flair or played in a bigger market, you would rather have your product endorsed by, say, Odell Beckham Jr., whereas Odell Beckham Jr. may not have the career or the seasons that Marvin Harrison had, right?
For sure.
When you look at the end, but there is certainly something different about that when you're talking about a sellable entity. But the whole thing's weird. The whole thing is weird. You know what would be hilarious is if like Kawhi went to LA and New York and all of a sudden he was Mr. Personality, right? He was doing commercials.
Remember when he first started having commercials and people were like, oh wow, Kawhi has sponsors. Kawhi has commercials. Nobody says that about any other player. But they did say it about Kawhi. Wow, Kawhi's in commercials now. Oh, that's cool. He's showing his personality. It's like, yeah, he has a personality just like every other human being on planet Earth. We just haven't seen it. He's a different type of guy, obviously. I think that was kind of apparent prior to the draft. But the fact is that it doesn't mean that he might not want other things in his career.
That's for sure. And so that's a strange situation. The other thing is, we've got these crazy win streaks going on, Kev, right? Houston's won 15 in a row. Golden State's won 5. Portland's won 7. The Pelicans have won 8. And so with these teams winning...
Raptors at 4.
Yeah. Well, the teams winning at these excessive rates every single night... Like, if you lose, you could very well be dropping all the way down in the standings.
Oh, there's one other win streak too, Chris. You missed it.
Oh, I did?
The Grizzlies have a 14-game win streak right now.
How dare you?
It's the truth.
How dare you?
Every loss is a win. It's the truth.
You know, this makes Adam Silver cringe. I pulled up ESPN's standings page today, and you know, they've got like all their tabs on the NBA. There is I had never seen it until this morning. There is a tab on there that says tank race.
I see it right now. Yeah.
There is literally a tab that says tank race.
That is amazing.
Tank race. I mean, you got damn near a third of the league not putting forth their best effort. It's preposterous.
That is funny.
You have 22 teams that are attempting to win and jockey for position in the playoffs. And then you have 8 that just couldn't care less and are actually fighting for the bottom.
64% odds that a top 3 pick, Chris. You should be feeling really good right now.
I should.
Yes, feeling great. Unbelievable. Should be on top of the world. Last night's win for the Grizzlies was remarkable.
Listen, I come to my non-excitement honest. Let me just explain this very quickly. So about a week ago, I had what would be called the talk with my son. And this was not a talk about sex.
I was like, wait a minute, where are you going with this?
Actually, frankly, I wish I would have had that talk instead of this one. It would have been easier for me to explain and less crushing for him. So we're outside shooting hoops, and he says to me, out of nowhere, as kids do, he says, "Who's the worst basketball player ever?" And I immediately shot back, Hasheem Thabeet. And he said, "Who is that?" And I said, "He played for the Grizzlies." And he said, "He did? I've never heard of him." And then he starts asking questions. I said, "Yeah, he's a really high draft pick for the Grizzlies, and he was just awful. Just awful. He's not in the NBA anymore, William." That's what I told him. And he said, "When was he drafted?" And I said, "Right behind Blake Griffin." He was drafted number 2. And he said, "He's drafted number 2?" He said, "Well, who was drafted behind him?" And I was like, James Harden, Steph Curry, Ricky Rubio, Tyreek Evans. And his response was, "Oh my God." And I said, "Yeah, oh my God." And he said, "James Harden and Steph Curry could be Grizzlies?" And I'm telling you, Kevin, the look of horror / disgust on this child's face. And so then go in, Grizzlies are getting beat 60-30 by the Boston Celtics in the second quarter. And I then have to have this subject, you know, I can then say, hey, this isn't all bad. You know, they're going to get a high draft pick, but that's a conversation that I can't have at that moment. Because I have just explained to him because the last time that they got a super high pick, they literally took the worst basketball player in the world. So at least I come by this honest. So I hope everybody out there is rooting, for my sake at least, that this is worth it in the end. Because I have certainly, not only have I been through it where it wasn't worth it, it wasn't close to worth it. It was the worst possible outcome. It is like, you know, people like when they're little, they get bit by a huge dog, and then for the rest of their life, they're spooked by dogs, right?
Yeah.
Because they had this horrible thing happen to them. That's me. When it comes to tanking for draft picks, I'm the guy that got bit by the huge dog. Right? So get the friggin' dog away from me. Get this tanking away from me. I want no part of it.
When William asks, "Dad, who's the worst player to make over $20 million in the NBA?" What's your answer going to be for that?
Oh, how dare you? How dare you? How dare you?
Because you've also been bit by the free agency dog too. I mean, I
just don't want anything anymore.
This is really rough.
Let me just, the fact that I don't hate the NBA by now is unbelievable.
I know.
Seriously, all I do is get bit by big dogs over and over and over again.
You've just been mauled by Grizzlies, like Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, that's what's happened to me. All right. So, hey, we mentioned Portland. Let's touch on a couple of these other things. Portland got their win with a huge fourth quarter, which they needed in order to beat the Lakers, who were on a 5-game winning streak before last night. And it really feels like Lonzo has been figuring it out. Certainly since he has come back from the knee injury, he has been a different player, Kevin.
Hell yeah, baby. Looking good. He's looking really good. I think all the bus talk has quickly faded away. Even last night, he hit some big shots again.
Right. He did hit some big shots again. And but the big thing is the threes. Like, he is now shooting confidently and putting weirdly, and again, the sample size is so insanely small, but the backcourt with him and Isaiah in it at the same time has worked and has not been ridiculous defensively, which is kind of shocking to me. I would not have suspected that Lonzo and Isaiah would be a decent pairing together necessarily, right? Yet it has been pretty good when you look at the numbers. It has actually been really good when you look at the numbers. It just depends on how much stock you want to put in it.
So you have Isaiah Thomas, Lonzo Ball, and Brandon Ingram. Granted, he's going to miss a week with a hip injury. Those three guys can all handle the ball. They can all make plays off the dribble. They can all create for themselves. They all can all create for others. And it looks really good on the court for the Lakers. It's looked great the past couple of weeks ever since they got IT and Ingram has taken control and Lonzo got back. It's looked really good. What happens when you insert LeBron in Isaiah's place? I'm just saying, it's a perfect fit. It's a perfect fit.
Oh, stop.
Remove IT, who still isn't really that great right now. He's scoring it efficiently, and plug in a superstar. They could be really good really soon. And the reason why is because of the development of Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram. Both those guys have looked great the past couple of weeks.
Don't you think if LeBron makes it to the finals, he'll stay in Cleveland?
I don't know.
Why would you come west? Seriously.
More to gain.
I don't think there is. You're in the finals every friggin' year. You got to win a series.
But yes, you're in the finals every year, but you're losing in the finals every year. And like with Michael Jordan, nobody knocks Michael Jordan for the series that he misses the finals, but everybody knocks LeBron when he loses in the finals.
Yeah, but
everybody knocks Tom Brady for losing 3 Super Bowls. Everybody knocks the person for losing in the big game, but not for not getting there.
I don't even think he'd get to the finals in the West.
I think he could. I really do. I really do.
But your beloved Houston team wouldn't be able to beat him?
I don't know. I think if you add LeBron and let's just say Paul George to another year of development to Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram, and then every veteran.
You didn't say Paul George too.
Well,
you said LeBron with all these young guys.
Of course, you need more than just LeBron.
Right.
But all the youth on that team, and then every veteran would want to flock there. I don't know. If it's not Cleveland, LA just feels like a no-brainer to me, to be honest with you.
All right. We also need to mention in the Eastern Conference, it appears as if the 8 teams are going to be the 8 teams. Now, Milwaukee, which could be a very dangerous 8 seed, is now the 8 seed as the standings are today. But again, all of this is extremely fluid, but there is a big separation. Whereas there are 10 teams fighting for 8 spots in the Western Conference, it would take, certainly the Pistons or the Hornets would have to start winning big and start winning quickly. Like you're talking winning 8 of 10 games in order to get themselves back in the mix to be able to fight for that last playoff spot. The way they have both played recently, with Detroit losing 8 of their last 10 and even worse than that. And the Hornets now losing 3 games in a row. It does not appear that would be on the horizon, that they were going to suddenly turn it around and go 8-2 over their next 10 games. So the big one is right there on the outside, which is Detroit. And they made the biggest splash, I think it's fair to say, outside of Cleveland, redoing their entire roster. The biggest splash, certainly in terms of name, was the Blake Griffin deal that Detroit made. And in the end, they were, I don't want to say really good, but they were pretty good with Reggie. Like, is it possible that Reggie Jackson is literally that important to that team? And sometimes it's not necessarily the quality of the player, but rather the extreme nature of the drop off, right? So it's not that you don't have Reggie Jackson as much as what you do have in his place, which is, you're right, lifelong journeyman Ish Smith or whoever it may be having to man that position. But it has been a disaster, and Stan Van Gundy, I think, would certainly be pretty high on the list of guys that wakes up in the morning and would be worried whether or not they're going to be doing that same job that they're doing next year, right?
For sure. No doubt. They took the ultimate gamble, taking on Blake Griffin with $1 billion left on his contracts and an endless list of injuries. everybody knew it was a risk when they did it, and maybe it'll work out, but it does not look good. Oh boy, it does.
Hold
it
on
doesn't
now.
look good.
Like putting this all at the feet of Blake Griffin is not necessarily fair. By the way,
of course, it's not.
I hate
it's
with
not
the
all on
fires
Blake.
of seven hells that I've somehow become a Blake Griffin defender. Trust me, I hate this.
It's not all on Blake at all, but he hasn't been good. He just hasn't. He's shooting 29% from 3, 45% from 2-point range. He hasn't been Blake Griffin, the superstar in LA. He's been,
there's no doubt about
Blake
that.
Griffin, the above average to good, sometimes
I agree,
overpaid guy on Detroit.
I agree.
That's what he's become, and that's kind of sad in a way.
But here's what I'll say. So they played a game at Cleveland last night, right? This was their starting lineup. Ish Smith, James Ennis, Reggie Bullock, Blake Griffin, and Andre Drummond. Off the bench was Eric Moreland, Anthony Tolliver, Stanley Johnson. I mean, what is this? You know what I'm saying?
Langston Galloway.
Like, what are you expecting? I mean, you started Ish Smith, James Ennis, and Reggie Bullock. So forgive me if I'm not necessarily right. Blake Griffin sucks, right? I mean, I get it. Like, he's not having a good year, but you are many times a reflection of who you are playing with. And that is because you are going to get, who else would you even, give a shit about on that? Like, who are you worried about scoring? Seriously, he is the only guy in that starting lineup that you would even care about if you're a defense. What are you worried? You worried?
It's rough.
Ish Smith, Andre Drummond, James Ennis, and Reggie Bullock?
When you read off the names, it's like, oh, wow, the Pistons have 29 wins. They're 29-35. They sound like a 20-win team when you just read the names out like that.
That starting lineup is an outrage. You know what I mean?
And to be fair, they're missing a couple guys. They're missing Reggie Jackson and John Lur. So they're missing a couple of guys. I'm not sure that would propel them into playoffs, but they're missing a couple of guys.
I do kind of wonder too if this is one of the things that stood out to me. If Stan Van is one of the guys that gets his head's on the chopping block, right? You are now moving into a era where, and we have seen it happen with general managers and guys that run teams, but also with coaching. And the last of the guys that they ain't trying to listen to what you got to say, right? They're not. All of these, and especially now with so many young owners, they want everybody to be pulling the same rope. They want to, arm in arm, walk out of the room and everybody be on the same page. And then there are the defiant ones, right? Like the Stan Van Gundy, like, let me coach my team. Shut up. Leave me alone, right? And many times you got to put them as running everything, which they did, which now they're taken away. Same with Doc, right? These old school guys, they don't want a boss. They don't want anybody telling them what to do. Like, leave me alone, man. Let me run this. If you want me, let me run everything. And I wonder if that will signify the end of that, right? I mean, you got these guys that are your elder statesmen, like the Popoviches and the Carlisles or whatever else.
And Tibbs in Minnesota.
And Tibbs. Right, but by the way, runs everything, right?
Yep.
And I wonder if that is going to be, if we've seen the last of that. Because we have seen now, we'll see what happens with the Tibbs stuff, but we have seen Doc Rivers get that title taken away, and we have seen Stan Van Gundy get that title taken away. And so is there ever going to be a time where somebody is now desired so much that they could come in and say, yeah, I'll take your job, but I want to run everything? Budenholzer got his taken away too, right? Didn't he have that deal?
Another one.
So we had Doc, Stan, Budenholzer, and that was kind of the deal, right? I'll take your job, but I want to run everything. And I think we're to the point where once the Stan Van stuff goes totally south, we'll probably never see that again. You agree?
I think it'll become less common. I think you can have it, but it needs, you don't know it's the right guy until you really have him in, the building, until he's actually running the show. But it can be effective. It can work, but you need to have a collaborative culture within the front office. There needs to be a lot of voices, and there needs to be a lot of openness. There needs to be a lot of empowerment of the lower level people in the front office to feel like their opinion matters, to feel like they're valued. And when you have that, I think you have a culture where everybody's willing to speak up and everybody's willing to, everybody feels like that their voice matters. And when you're the lead guy, whether it's Greg Popovich or Bill Belichick in the NFL, when you have that, I think that's where the best ideas come from.
Well, and the greatest asset to the structure of actually having a front office and then having a coach, and the coach works in conjunction and for the front office, right? He has a boss, is that when things need to change or when roster needs to change, that sometimes like the best are the guys that can adapt. And I think we have in this particular case this year, we have two great examples of that, Kevin. And those are two what would be considered more of the old school guys in Dwayne Casey and Nate McMillan. And they have altered what they have done for many years and have found great success as they have adapted. And those are great stories, right? Whereas there's nobody to listen to if you're Stan Van Gundy, right? There's nobody to like run stuff by you and say, hey, maybe we should do this, or maybe we should do that, or maybe we should, right? Like you want to be the guy that can't be told nothing. And I look now and I see Dwayne Casey's team is the number 1 seed as of this morning. And Nate McMillan's team is the number 4 seed as of this morning. And both of those guys changed, right? After many years of being head coaches. And I think that's the good example of working with management to the benefit of the team.
By the way, even with Greg Popovich, he relinquished his role as general manager back in 2002 to R.C. Buford. So he had that role when he first came back to the Spurs, right. And then when he was head coach, but he gave it up in 2002. And granted, he still has a powerful voice within the front office. He gave that up to somebody else, which I think speaks to his ability to defer the decision-making responsibilities to I guess, like I said, empowering others within the front office. Because R.C. Buford was just the head scout at the time, and he immediately elevated to general manager.
3/4 of the season is done. So there's about, as I said, some of these teams have like 18 games left. Some of them have 22 games left. But there's about a quarter of the season left for virtually every team. Therefore, we will make our quick predictions now on what these year-end awards are going to look like at the end. The 3/4 season awards, I think that most of these we are going to be in lockstep and they're going to be pretty easy. The MVP, if we have to predict today, would be James Harden. They're the number 1 seed. His season has been ridiculous. I think somebody tweeted this jokingly, but I don't think it was a small thing. Remember how I was talking about the highlights and, what goes viral and what was on people's minds all the time? And it might be silly, but it is true that every damn night last season, Westbrook was doing something. Every night.
You're right.
And that was just not the case with Harden. His, quote, highlights are not highlights that are the things that get retweeted a million times, right? He doesn't have these viral moments all that often. But he did, and he probably had the most viral one of this entire basketball season. Seriously.
It was beautiful. It was the first thing I thought about the following morning.
I think that Wes Johnson thing is real. Like, I think that the fact that got passed around so much, that was, so somebody tweeted like, hey, was that his MVP moment? And I know it was like, maybe half joking, but I kind of thought like, you know what? This kind of stuff does matter, right? It is this image of this season, which is him breaking people off and staring them down and just having this dominating season. And the team, frankly, having the best record in the NBA. So we're on the same page on that, right? I don't even think anybody has a great chance at it. Anthony Davis would be the one that could take a run.
I think he would need to continue playing just outrageously, like Wilt Chamberlain and Shaq and Kevin Garnett all at the same time for him to have a chance. But I don't know. It's unfair to expect that.
This is an interesting one. Coach of the year. I think that if the Raptors keep on and they win,
it's Dwayne Casey. It's got to be. I'm with you.
I think so, right?
I'm with you.
I think it's Dwayne Casey.
Yep.
Think about this. They have the second best point differential in the NBA. They do. Theirs is 8.6 and the Warriors is 8.5. I mean, that's incredible. That is incredible. The Raptors have a better point differential than the friggin' Warriors.
Even like aside from the results, Casey and that coaching staff revised the team's style of play.
Correct.
They're moving the ball, shooting more threes. They effectively made that change happen, and the Raptors have elevated their play, and we'll see how it translates in the playoffs.
The other thing is, man, you watch them, he so often pulls the right strings with that bench and when to leave them in. Sometimes he'll just let them close games.
Yes.
Because that bench is really awesome.
Yep.
Right? Instead of just doing the whole, it's time for me to get my starters back in. If that bench is rocking, and I'll be damned if more often than not they are, right? He'll just let them roll with it. And sometimes, like I said, close out games. I think he has done a very, very good job, this Dwayne Casey.
He's pushing the right buttons.
Yeah. And I also think it would be a nice honor considering, as you said, you do get credit for altering. You do get credit for changing what you have been. I think that signifies being a great coach. Rookie of the year.
Ben Simmons.
Yeah, I had thought that Mitchell has a great shot at this. I don't know if they're going to get to the playoffs or not. And if he's the leading scorer on a team that gets to the playoffs, I think Donovan Mitchell can get the award. I still think that. I mean, he's averaging over 20 points a game, right? And he's been fantastic. But if Simmons' team is in the playoffs, and as of now, like that's the other thing about the Pistons sucking so bad, is that now it looks like the 8 teams that are in are in. So I think I'd have to agree with you. In the end, it's going to be a historic season. The numbers that he puts up as a rookie, and his team is going to be a playoff team, which I don't know if that was necessarily a for sure case the last time we talked about it, right? Because I talked about Simmons' team might not make the playoffs and Mitchell's team does. And if Mitchell's team does, winning is valued so much when it comes to these awards, and he may get it. But Simmons' team is for sure going to be in the playoffs, I think, right? So Donovan Mitchell doesn't have that over him, is all I'm saying, right?
Ben Simmons from day one has just been dominant for a rookie. Yeah, and I think that's simple as that, really. Defensive player of the year. This is tough, isn't it? I think it is tough. There's been this sentiment that it should be Kevin Durant, which would be unbelievable. I don't mean crazy like stupid. I mean crazy like unbelievable. I've heard some sentiment for Paul George, right? That like some of these superstars have gotten more talk this year. Well, Kawhi's out, obviously, and Gobert missed a lot of time. My go-to is always Draymond. Yeah. If you told me pick a defender, he's still the guy I'd take because because of how devastating he can go out there and guard your point guard on the last possession just as well as he can guard your big guy on the last possession. This is hard, man, because with Paul George, ever since Robertson went out, George hasn't really been elite defensively because he's had to play more on the ball. He's not able to be like a free safety. How about that? How about we just give it to that guy? Because I swear to God, they were like one of the best defensive teams in the world with him, and they are crap without him. It's unbelievable. And then you get some bigs, too. You got Rudy Gobert, you got Joel Embiid, you got Al Horford, you got Clint Capella. Man, I mean, I don't know who it is. Like the guys that I have on my list, Draymond, Kevin Durant, Rudy Gobert, Joel Embiid, Al Horford, Clint Capella, Paul George. Those are the 6 guys that I would consider voting for. And I don't know who it is. Here's the thing. If he would have played all the games, I think this would be the year that Gobert would get the honor. Problem is he's played 38 games, Kev. That's hard. Yeah. That's hard, right? He's going to play significantly less games than everybody else. So cross him off the list. Cross Gobert off because of games played. Yeah, that's what I'd say. Okay. And by the way, Roberson is 3rd in the NBA in defensive real plus minus, whether or not you want to care about that or not, right? He is on that list as a guy that has that level of impact defensively. And frankly, when I see the impact that it's had on the team when he's been out, I do kind of think he should get it. I think I'm Draymond, right? I mean, because of the versatility still? Yeah, I think the versatility, I think that just what he brings to the table in terms of being able to guard everything on the court, right? He can guard everything on the court. Has he been Draymond at his best? Even if he hasn't been, maybe that's still worthy of being Defensive Player of the Year. Yeah, I think there's some level of fatigue when it comes to Golden State, right? I mean, come on. In what world would we not be talking about Kevin Durant being an MVP candidate? But we didn't, right? Yeah. He should be. He should be. Or Curry. Either one, right? Like, there's just been some Golden State fatigue, which is, that's the way it goes. When they're not the fun new thing. That's what the Rockets are. That's what the Raptors are, right? They're Woody, and these are like Buzz Lightyear. I look at defensive efficiency right now. Number 1 is Boston, 2, San Antonio, 3, Toronto, 4, Philly, 5, Utah, 6, Golden State. So those are the top 6 as it stands right now. I think the two guys that don't really get discussed enough for Defensive Player of the Year are Horford and Capella. I think those two guys, they anchor two of the better defenses in the league.
The Horford one is a good one. I mean, they're number one in defensive efficiency, right?
And it's largely due to Al Horford. I mean, you mentioned the versatility that Draymond has. Horford has that. Horford's rebounding is fairly weak, and the past couple weeks, I think his defense has slipped individually a little bit. He's still really good, but hasn't been top end guy in that end. So I don't know, man. I have a hard time with this. I really do. A Defensive Player of the Year this year is tough. There's no clear guy that stands out except for, like you said, Robertson. Robertson's absence really speaks to how much Oklahoma City has fallen off.
Yeah, it just wrecked them for sure.
And it made Paul George worse too. Paul George hasn't been the same without him.
That's for sure. And then most improved player, most improved is usually like somebody that's in their second year, right? That just gets a lot more minutes, and so we give it to him. But the answer is Oladipo, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the guy turned in one of the best players in the league, for God's sakes.
Yep, it's him.
It's not even close, right?
His shooting has fallen off the past couple months, but he's still the guy. Still most improved player of the year. He's been outstanding.
Yeah, I mean, everybody destroyed that trade. Everybody thought that was bad return, right? When it came to this. All right, it is, last thing, conference championship week for college basketball, and I know that you do draft class every Friday with Jonathan Tjarks, which, by the way, that last podcast that you guys did begins with the subject of soup, in which you let Tjarks get away with some of the most outrageous stuff I've ever heard. I'm not a big soup guy. I've never really eaten soup. I'm like, what in the F is going on here? Like, I don't, what? And then the second thing he said, isn't that a thing? Ramen noodle soup? Ramen noodle soup? Like, what? Does he do this podcast from Mars? Like, I don't even know. I don't even know. What's up with Tjarks, man? I can't wait to talk to him again. And I'm going to be like, what are you talking? I have never, like, for all the draft analyses that you guys do, and I quite enjoy it, nothing will ever stand out to me more than him saying, I'm not a big soup guy. I never have really eaten soup. And that isn't ramen noodle soup a thing. Like, it was like he didn't even know chicken noodle soup. Like, I don't even know what's going on.
Next time he's in LA or we're all in the same place at the same time, we got to find the best soup in whatever city we're in, and we're going there and we're taking it there. Because my theory is, for whatever reason, he just hasn't had good soup. Maybe he just never had good soup in his life. It was never a choice he made going out to eat. Maybe family never made soup at home.
Here's the thing, Kev. He's not 9. You know what I'm saying? It'd be different if you were talking to a 9-year-old and it's like, hey, try something new. Oh, I've never had soup. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's been around the world for, like, he's 30 plus years old. Guy just got married, for God's sake. I swear to God, in all my life, I have never heard anyone say, I've never really gotten into soup. I've never really had soup. Like, of all the food, like, you could say, hey, I've never, like, if somebody told me, like, you know what, I've never even had sushi, or I've never had oysters, or I've never had, you know, something like that, right? That is reasonable. What is unreasonable is the fact that you've never had soup. Like, that's... It's like the most universal food. Like, Michelangelo, like, took breaks from the Sistine Chapel and ate soup. Like that. Never had soup. So this is a long way of saying I don't trust any of his draft analysis anymore. I can't trust a guy that's never eaten soup.
Oh my God.
This is an outrage. Who are you most excited to see how they will perform during these big time conference tournaments that are going on this week? Who would you peg out that you want to make sure to go out of your way to watch them in their conference tournament?
I'll give you a couple for the month as a whole.
Let me hear it.
DeAndre Ayton, the top guy, obviously. I think, you know, Jonathan Givony of ESPN recently bumped him up to number 1 on his board. And I think it's worth thinking about him within that lens, one of the top guys. Tjarks wrote an article today on Mikal Bridges from Villanova. He's a guy to watch, a junior prospect, 3-and-D style guy. I'm definitely not as high on him as Tjarks is, but interesting guy. I'll be watching for Daniel Gafford from Arkansas. I have mixed feelings on him. Interesting player. How about Trayvon Duval from Duke? Interesting point guard.
All right.
We have some people within the Ringers offices who think he's quite underrated, kind of a early second-round pick type of guy. Those are just a handful of names thrown out there. Jalen Brunson, also from Villanova. There's a lot. Go to theringer.com and read our stuff.
Yeah, well, now, as you know, Kevin, it used to be way back when I would go through and I would look at where all these mock drafts have everybody. And what I would attempt to do is try to find the small school that had the NBA prospect on it, right? So you could find, say, a Washington State that had a guy named Klay Thompson, or you could find, what was the little school that Farid went to? Was that Moorhead? He did go to Moorhead. Okay. Right. So what you could find over the years was sometimes if you could find those teams that had like an NBA caliber player on the team, then those would be good ones to find upsets for, right? And so that Moorhead team knocked off Rick Pitino's Louisville team. Big upset, right? And then we look up and Kenneth Farid had a good NBA career for sure, even though he's been in witness protection, I think, for the last 3. I haven't even heard his name. But this year, there's like nobody on any of these small schools. Nobody. Like they are all piled into all the big schools now, aren't they? Like, I mean, there's the Shamet kid on Wichita, who I love, but there's just not, like the small schools don't have guys. I saw there was one from Boise State, right? Was it Hutchinson?
Yes.
Okay.
Chandler.
He's a guy that's draftable or at least projected to be in the first round, but there is no like guy that's at the small school. There is no Damian Lillard.
Yeah.
Right. That's at Weber State or something.
Not a lotto guy.
Yeah. Or even first round for that matter. Right. I mean, I think Boise was the most random of the schools.
You know, the guys that kind of are interesting to me, 2 guys on one of the biggest name schools that really are, they're not highly touted on Kentucky. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, their guard, and then Jared Vanderbilt, backup forward.
All right.
Both those guys are really intriguing to me, maybe even a little bit more so than Kevin Knox, the guy everybody, rightfully has ranked as a mid to late lottery pick. Right. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, guard, and then Jared Vanderbilt, forward. Those guys are really, really interesting to me.
Obviously, both outstanding high school players and big-time recruits, as is everybody that gets a scholarship at Kentucky.
Put it this way, Jared Vanderbilt's one of the weirdest players you'll watch. I'm not going to say anything about him. Just watch Jared Vanderbilt. He's a weird player, hard to figure out, but could be really good in the NBA, I think.
Fair enough. Kevin, it's always fun, and I'm glad that we were able to make up for last week.
Me too. That was fun. I'll have to try out the Clippers' new sponsor, Bumble, instead of Tinder.
Oh, good grief.
I'll have to try that out.
Good luck with Bumble, Kev, and switch that phone.
Yeah, will do, Chris. Good chatting.
It's going to do it for another Ringer NBA show. If you dig what you're hearing, go give us a rating and review on iTunes, and we will talk to you next week.